Welcome to Mind Power, a Brains R Us program brought to you by Centerpoint Research Institute. In these special episodes, you'll hear thought-provoking articles designed to expand your mind, useful tips to improve your life, and the latest neuroscience research to help you tap into your fullest potential. Now here's Marc Gilson with today's Mind Power.
This is Paducah, The Virtues of Asking for Help by Marc Gilson. It's 2 a.m, mid-July, somewhere south of Paducah, Kentucky. I was driving down a moonlit highway, the 24, sipping black coffee, long gone cold, on my way to Nashville on business. I'd never been to Paducah, Kentucky before, but while Paducah certainly has its merits, at 2 a.m. there really isn't much to separate it from 100 other towns, at least to the eye of a weary traveler like me. I had left Paducah behind almost an hour ago. The thought of reaching my destination was in the back of my mind because foremost on my mind was ascertaining my present location. I had no clear indication that I was on the right path. I was alone and tired, I was low on gas, and while I would not have admitted it to anybody at the time, I was gradually coming to terms with the fact that I was lost. This was in the days before GPS, before cell phones, with map apps that could have helped me. Even worse, my trusty old paper map I'd purchased in St. Louis earlier that day turned out to be about 22 years old and about as useful as the radio, which was playing Who's Going to Drive You Home by the Cars, immediately followed by Paul McCartney singing The Long and Winding Road. At least, I told myself, I was still driving in the right direction, getting closer to Nashville with every passing lane stripe. I hoped. My last point of reference had been Paducah, or more specifically, a Texaco gas station on the southern edge of Paducah. But that Texaco station had disappeared long ago in the rearview mirror. I was tired, and I was beginning to wonder if I should just pull over and sleep on the side of the road. Every passing mile looked just like the one before it. There were turnoffs, junctions, bypasses, route exits, and I hadn't the faintest notion which of these might lead me to my destination. I was driving by instinct and guts, or, to be more honest, by a misguided and overinflated trust in my own supposed navigational abilities. I don't like the feeling of being where I don't want to be and not really knowing where to go, and yet somehow going somewhere anyway in hopes of ending up where I want to be by sheer luck and good traveling karma. But there's one thing I don't like even more than that, and that's asking for directions. Asking for directions is something confused people do. It's a sign that you're not in control, that something went wrong in the planning, and that mistakes were made. Asking for directions makes you look stupid, vulnerable, inept. Somebody who asks for directions isn't self-sufficient. They're codependent. Only fools ask for directions. So, not being a fool, I wasn't about to waste time stopping to ask for directions when I could just keep on moving. Besides, I've long believed in the theory that as long as you don't ask somebody for directions, you're really not officially lost. Once you ask somebody, how do I get to, or does such and such highway take me to such and such junction? Well, you automatically become lost. Really lost. Officially lost. I was not about to ask for directions, no way. As long as I just kept going, I'd not really be lost, I'd just be taking the scenic route. I was not going to stop now. But my rental car had other ideas. The low fuel warning light began flashing from behind the steering wheel, and just as I was slapping myself in the forehead for not filling up my gas tank at that Texaco back in Paducah, I suddenly recognized yet another Texaco station, gleaming like a beacon of hope in the night, just off the highway at the upcoming exit. Thank God. Thank Texaco. Pulling off the highway, I sighed in relief. Sure, I was still lost, but at least I could continue being lost without also being stuck. The sleepy station attendant greeted me with a 2 a.m. wave, which I would define as a friendly but half-hearted hand gesture indicating nothing more than the person waving is mostly alive and barely awake. His name tag said Irv. I asked Irv for a fill-up and took a deep breath of the heavy, humid night air while uncapping the gas tank. Somewhere beyond the range of the bright overhead lights of the gas station, a choir of cicadas chittered and chirped in staccato rhythm. I stood by my little rental Honda as Irv and I watched the pump tick the gallons and dollars away. Little did he know that I was in the midst of a sticky dilemma. Little did he know I was lost. Or maybe he did. Maybe he could sense it, like the way animals can sense fear in humans. Irv swatted at a moth the size of a hummingbird hovering over his head. Nah, Irv couldn't sense that I was lost. But Irv did seem like he'd probably know the way to Nashville. And if I could overcome my own pride, I might just find out from him how to get there. Of course, he might think I was an idiot, and maybe he'd be right. So where are you headed? Irv casually asked as my car drank its fill. Nashville, I replied, watching a semi-truck growling down the highway into the darkness. Probably going to Nashville. Irv nodded and reached to top off the tank before removing the gas nozzle. That's $36, he said, as I replaced the gas cap. I began fumbling for the cash in my wallet. Meanwhile, there was an argument happening in my head. Do I ask for directions? No. It'll be okay, I said to myself. I pretended to be counting out the money slowly to give me more time to argue. How can I ask for directions? I'd look like an idiot. But I can't just keep driving around all night. For all I know, I'm on my way to Dallas. Irv was still standing there with his hand out. 36 on the gas, he reiterated. Yeah, okay, hang on, I stalled. I handed him the money and I noticed that he began to look at me a little strangely, one eye slightly squinting at me under the fluorescent gas station lights. With all my quirky behavior, I probably started to raise his suspicions. So where are you from, mister? He inquired with a raised eyebrow. I chuckled nervously. Well, from Oregon, not really from around here. He nodded, apparently confirming his suspicions of me. Been on the road long? He asked in his rich Kentucky drawl. A little while now, I said. Left Paducah over an hour ago. He looked at me with a puzzled, almost startled expression like I had suddenly grown a second nose. Then he held up his hand and said, Hang on a minute, buddy, and suddenly jogged away into the station booth. Odd. He returned seconds later and he pushed a road map into my hands. Here, he said, it's on me. I laughed. Oh, thanks, but I know where I'm going. What a lie. I didn't even know where I was. The map, an updated map, was the very holy grail I sought, but my ego wouldn't let me take it. It kept telling me, you're not lost. No, you're not lost at all. You know right where you are. You're at a Texaco. You're talking to Irv. With a resolute facade of self-confidence, I held the map back out to him. Really, I don't need it, but thanks anyway. Irv gave me a straight look in the eye and a slightly crooked smile. Yeah, okay, he said slowly, but do you even know where you really are? I stood there for a moment, breathlessly waiting for him to tell me where I was. I shrugged sheepishly. He pointed to the ground and said, Mister, this is Paducah. I took the map and left. How often have we found ourselves in a situation where we've needed to ask for directions, but we've just been too proud to do it? I'm not just talking about directions to Nashville, but to anywhere in life we want to go. How many times do we ignore the helping hand and end up going around in circles? How many times have we resisted asking someone close to us for a little help with a personal crisis, with a financial problem, for a ride to work, to help move the piano, to help grieve a loss? Asking for help is, for some of us anyway, taboo. Our culture prizes self-reliance and independence. We equate these characteristics with strength. We don't want to need anybody's help. We don't want to have to rely on others for our happiness or success. We strive to establish our own autonomy so as not to be dependent on anybody or anything else. The rugged individualist is one of our cultural icons, like Indiana Jones. But even Indiana Jones had help. Like many people, I was raised with lots of praise for what I managed to accomplish on my own. When you learn to tie your shoes on your own, or do your laundry on your own, or pay your bills on your own, you're maturing into adulthood. Indeed, maturity is often defined by how self-reliant one becomes. So it's no wonder many of us are thoroughly uncomfortable with the idea of seeking help, be it from a friend, a doctor, a teacher, a coach, or even a stranger. We're adults, strong and independent, right? A real man or a confident woman doesn't need anybody else. We don't need no stinking help. Yet this path of individualism can be a lonely one, especially when we honestly and genuinely need help. It can produce feelings of helplessness, depression, and fear. While we may wish to appear as though we've got it all together, by never asking for help, we may be struggling needlessly with burdens that might be lightened by a willingness to accept some assistance from somebody around us. Nobody can assume responsibility for our lives, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't occasionally lean on those around us. While many of us have been taught to respect the merits of individual accomplishment, we sometimes fail to recognize the benefits of relying on other people for help when we really need it. And it takes strength to do it. Sometimes it takes more strength to ask for help than to pretend that we don't need it. Those we admire and respect the most often seem to be independently strong, self-reliant, distinct from the mundane masses. But we sometimes forget that very few of life's greatest accomplishments are made by one person acting alone. Somebody once said that team's a life sport, and to compete in this sport, to succeed and thrive, we need one another. We need each other's expertise, compassion, wisdom, kindness, and support. In life, strength doesn't come only from independence, but from the interplay and exchange of ideas, feelings, and perspectives. It's a maxim of human progress. It's a group endeavor. Collaboration, cooperation, partnership, teamwork. This is what often gets the job done. I'm often amazed at the number of people that I encounter in my life coaching work who tell me how alone they feel, how unsupported they are by those around them, and how distant and isolated they are from the people who, quote, really understand them. And yet I often find with a little exploring that the deeper reasons have much more to do with a certain unwillingness on their part to engage and integrate their friends and family into their lives. In other words, to ask for help. There is an ingrained belief that they cannot be understood, that no one could possibly help them, that they must hide their needs, and that they must survive solely by their own wits without relying on others. Or maybe like me on that dark and unfamiliar highway, they simply confuse the virtues of self-reliance with blind stubbornness. So their loneliness is not imposed on them by others, but by their own hang-ups about the exclusivity of their needs. Ironically, the people who are most lonely and in need of support are sometimes those who are the most giving and the least willing to ask for directions. I recently spoke to a wonderful woman in British Columbia, employed full-time and a single mother of 3 children still living at home. Let's call her Helen. Her story was similar to those you may have heard before. Helen worked hard at her clerical job and even harder at home. She sacrificed an immense amount of personal energy in the raising of her children. She babysat her sister's children on the weekends. She got up at 5 a.m. and was rarely to bed before midnight. She hadn't had a vacation of any kind in 4 years. She was dedicated to her children and to others' children, and committed to her vocation as a social worker. She often accepted a much heavier caseload at work than she could really comfortably manage. Although Helen is surrounded by people who love, need, and respect her, she felt very alone, very drained, very exhausted. Helen is a giver, but her ceaseless giving was creating an internal crisis. Helen's energy was low, and she was showing classic signs of clinical depression. She was running on fumes. While not wandering the highways of Kentucky at 2 a.m. like I was, she was certainly just as lost in her own maze of life and just as reticent to ask for help. I ventured to ask Helen a simple question. Have you asked your kids for some help? She paused and then she said, "Oh, no, I don't think they get help. They're busy being kids. Besides, they can't do what I do." "Yes," I said, "but have you asked them?" After another long pause, she replied more thoughtfully, "Actually, I haven't really asked them." Helen is a tremendous giver, but it hadn't even crossed her mind to ask for something in return for what she gives. It didn't seem okay for her to ask for help, but in not asking for help, she was really doing not only herself but her children and those who depended on her a disservice. She was teaching them that giving was a one-way street and that sacrificing to the point of self-destruction was the same as a mother's love. So the strategy I asked Helen to try was simple. Build a support system by asking for help. Now, I can't tell you that it was easy for her at first, but she did succeed eventually. She began by assigning some chores for her children to do, things like setting the table for dinner, clearing the dishes after meals, and bringing dirty laundry to the laundry room. She then asked some of her coworkers for assistance with her caseload. She set aside Sunday afternoons as me time and spent it indulging in some simple pleasures of her own choosing. Bookstore browsing, lunching with a friend, watching a favorite movie. Within a couple weeks, Helen was experiencing the simple benefits of asking for help. When she called me, I didn't even immediately recognize the lighthearted voice on the other end of the phone. She said, "I feel like I have a newfound sense of direction and optimism. I feel like I'm alive again, and I really didn't have to do much." Asking for help isn't always easy. It takes strength and courage to ask for directions. So why do some of us think it's something only the weak and confused do? Why are so many of us so afraid to ask for directions when we feel lost? Perhaps one of the pitfalls of the personal growth movement today is that we can sometimes become too focused on independence and autonomy. We do a lot of talking about being on our own path or finding our own answers. Perhaps we'd all be a little happier and healthier, though, if we were to explore the benefits of asking for directions and support when we need it. In doing so, we can discover that the world isn't as hostile or uncaring of a place as we may have thought, and that it's truly okay to look to one another for a little help now and then. Helping others is a terrific feeling, but there can be no giving without also the willingness to accept. This exchange of energy, the balance of give and take, is where we find the greatest powers known to us: love, compassion, understanding, and kindness. When we refuse to ask for help from those who love us, we deny the value of those people in our lives. In the case of Helen, one other benefit to her willingness to ask her children for help around the house was an increased sense of self-esteem among the kids. It feels good to help. But as with all things in life, balance is critical. In a sense, most successful human communication depends heavily on both healthy boundaries and healthy honesty. When these aspects are out of balance, you can expect there to be a little disharmony in your life. So as we strive to become more fully developed as human beings, let's keep in mind that we are all part of the same living force. That separateness is just an illusion, and we can therefore safely seek out help and ask for directions when we need to. John Donne told us that no man is an island. Indeed, at the very deepest level of human existence, there are no islands. We are each different flora and fauna of the same vast and connected landscape.
I hope that you've enjoyed this video taken from our archive of mind power. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be well.
This episode of Brains R Us is brought to you by the Buy HoloSync app, the only official app for HoloSync. Enjoy quick daily brain-enhancing meditations, long-form HoloSync radio stations for up to 8 hours of continuous brainwave states, easily access all of your HoloSync suites and courses, and listen to more Brains R Us podcast episodes, all from your favorite device. Head on over to holosync.app/podcast26 right now to claim a free 7-day premium trial, no credit card necessary.